21-year-old Denise Amber Lee was born in Inglewood, Florida on August 6, 1986, to Rick and Sue Goff. Her father, Rick, was a Charlotte County Sheriff's Office sergeant for 25 years. Denise graduated from Lemon Bay High School in 2004. She then enrolled at a local community college where she met 23-year-old Nathan Lee. They started dating, and he soon bought her an inexpensive heart-shaped ring. However, that ring was priceless to Denise as she never removed it from her finger once it was on. The couple married in 2005 and started a family. They had 2 sons, ages 6 months and 2 years. Denise was considered by friends and relatives to be quiet and shy and wouldn't go out much as her babies came first. Denise and Nathan rented a home in Northport but had plans to put away money to purchase their own home. Nathan was the family's sole wage earner and worked 3 jobs so Denise could stay home and raise the kids. Nathan's main job was as a meter reader for the Florida Power and Light Company. He also stocked shelves at Winn-Dixie on occasion, and during the summer, he would umpire Little League games for extra money. By all accounts, the Lees loved each other unconditionally and were working together to build a life of their dreams. "38-year-old Michael King was described by his family as a fairly typical youth. That is, until he was 6 years old when he sustained a head injury in a sledding accident. An expert witness at trial later said the injury was a divot in his brain. The injury was so severe, King required special education services after. As per court records, his siblings reported that his behavior changed significantly after that incident. For example, relatives said that at the age of 13, he nearly killed his brother with a bow and arrow while acting out a cartoon. When King was 17, after watching the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, he chased family members with a chainsaw while his face was expressionless. Despite this history, Michael King seemed to have no problems functioning as an adult. He was once a respected community member. He became a skilled and successful plumber, was married, had a son, and the family owned their own home. People testified on his behalf that he always tried to lead an honest life and had no history of violence or a criminal record. However, according to his sister-in-law, he had fallen out with his wife. Eventually, she left him for another man she met on the internet. After that, things went from bad to worse as he was under severe financial duress, unemployed for a prolonged period, and facing bankruptcy and foreclosure. Then, in December 2007, there was a breakup with another girlfriend. Weeks later, a broke and possibly resentful Michael King entered his dark green Camaro and drove up and down the streets of Northport until he saw something that interested him. There was one house in particular he was circling again and again. The house was occupied by the Lee family. It was a sunny and seasonably mild 66 degrees with a gentle breeze in Northport, Florida on the morning of January 17, 2008. Nathan and Denise had agreed to leave windows open instead of using air conditioning as another way to cut back on bills. At around 11 a.m., Denise took a call from Nathan and they had a routine conversation. That chat ended as usual, with the couple saying to each other, "I love you." A couple of hours later, Denise's neighbor noticed a green Camaro driving around the block. It seemed out of place and must have circled 4 or 5 times between 1 and 2 p.m. Out of curiosity, the neighbor stepped outside and made eye contact with the driver. When the Camaro pulled into the Lee's driveway, she assumed he had found the house he was looking for, so she returned to her home. The neighbor stepped outside again 10 or 15 minutes later to observe the Camaro departing from the Lee's home. At 3:30 in the afternoon, Nathan Lee returned home from work to find Denise was not around. Oddly, her cell phone, purse, and keys were all still in the house. He called out her name, but there was no answer. He then walked to the kids' room and found both kids home alone. Her clothes were laid out as if she was getting ready to shower, and the windows were closed, but the air conditioning was off. Nathan immediately contacted Denise's mother, but she hadn't heard from Denise either. His next call was to the Northport Police Department.
Northport Emergency?
Yes, I'm at 7912 Latour Avenue. I just got home from work, and my wife, I can't find her. My kids were in the house, and I don't know where she is. I've looked every single place.
Upon learning of the 911 call, Denise's father acted immediately. As a 25-year Charlotte County Sheriff's Office veteran, This matter was taken especially seriously. At 4 p.m., Detective Chris Morales was sent to the Lee residence and found no signs of forced entry or a struggle. Rick was able to call on all area state, county, and municipal law enforcement agencies to search for Denise and her captor immediately following her abduction. It would become one of the most extensive cooperative search efforts the area has ever seen. It involved hundreds of police, volunteers, rescue teams, patrol cars, helicopters, horses, canines, and ATVs. Meanwhile, at 3:30 p.m., the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office sent its teletype operator home to avoid paying overtime. A teletype machine is now obsolete equipment used by law enforcement to send and receive urgent typed messages such as a bolo. With the teletype operator sent home, it was up to the dispatchers to monitor the teletype machine for important messages. This is a critical point that will become relevant a bit later. At 4:59 p.m., the Northport Police Department sends its first bolo over the teletype machine. The message describes a green Camaro and gives a description of the suspect. It also includes Denise's name, age, and hair color. However, the message sat on the machine as the usual teletype operator had been sent home. According to testimony, sometime between 5:30 and 6 p.m., Michael King unexpectedly stopped by his cousin Harold Muxlow's house and made a strange request. He asked to borrow a flashlight, a gas can, and a shovel. He claimed that his lawnmower was stuck in his front yard. After Muxlow provided the items, King immediately departed. As Muxlow was walking back to his house, he heard a female voice from King's green Camaro cry out, "Call the cops!" Muxlow turned around and approached the driveway toward King, asking what that was all about. King replied, "Nothing, don't worry about it." As Muxlow walked to his house, he approached King's car a second time. That's when he saw King reaching over the front console and pushing down a person's head. King then returned to the driver's seat and drove off. Muxlow was concerned. He drove to King's residence to see if King had returned and if, in fact, there was a stuck lawnmower in the yard. When Muxlow reached the house, there was no lawnmower and no Camaro. He called his daughter Sabrina and told her what had happened. It was 6 p.m. when Sabrina called the police. Sabrina Muxlow told the dispatcher precisely what her father told her. She said her cousin Michael had a girl tied up in the car's back seat and that the girl screamed, "Call the cops." The dispatcher relayed the information to detectives as the search for Denise continued. At 6:14 p.m., the Northport Police Department received a third 911 call. This time, it was from Denise. Restrained in the backseat of a car and with her eyes covered, she somehow managed to use King's cell phone to call 911 as he drove. She provided information to the call taker while leading King into thinking she was talking to him. The call abruptly ends with Michael King looking for his phone. Meanwhile, Denise's father was at the sheriff's office during her desperate call and confirmed it was his daughter. The phone Denise used was traced back to Michael King, and law enforcement rushed to King's house in Northport to forcibly gain entry. Unfortunately, no one was on the premises. Minutes after Denise's phone call, a woman named Jane Kowalski was stopped at a traffic light on Highway 41. Suddenly, she heard screaming and a commotion coming from a dark-colored Camaro in the lane next to her. She described the screaming as horrific, terrified. "I've never heard anything like that in my life." As she watched, the man driving the Camaro turned around and began to push something down in the back seat. Then, Kowalski saw a hand rise from the back seat and start pounding on the passenger side window. When the traffic light turned green, Kowalski hesitated to allow the Camaro to go first, hoping she could see his plates. However, King remained idle, and when Kowalski began to slowly roll forward, he quickly changed lanes and pulled behind her. When Kowalski realized he would not pass her, she dialed 911. Kowalski initially thought she had reached the Northport Police Department, but because she drove past the county line, her call was routed to the Charlotte County 911 Center. Due to the earlier missed bolo, the Charlotte County 911 Center was unaware of the latest developments. Consequently, no car was ever dispatched to the location provided by Kowalski. It was from a TV news report the following day that Kowalski learned she had witnessed Denise's abduction. When she called the Northport Police Department to explain that she had made a 911 call, they didn't know what she was talking about. A subsequent internal affairs investigation determined that the Charlotte County dispatcher who took Kowalski's call did not immediately enter the information into the computer-aided dispatch system, as dispatchers are trained to do. Instead, she wrote the information down on a piece of paper and yelled it across the room. She then assumed it would be handled. Moments later, there was a shift change. Unfortunately, the log passed to the new shift workers did not include any of the 3 bolos issued by the Northport Police Department over the teletype system. At 6:50 p.m., Michael King's cousin, Harold Muxlow, walked over to a 7-Eleven convenience store to use a payphone. He made the 5th and final 911 call of the day relating to the abduction. At 9 p.m. on the evening of the abduction, 2 officers were posted at Toledo Blade Boulevard near I-75 watching for a green Camaro. The officers had a description of the car, a license plate number, and driver's license photos of Denise and King. At approximately 9:10 p.m., a green Camaro matching the description drove onto the I-75 on-ramp. Based on his information, one officer intercepted the vehicle and drew his weapon. He ordered the driver to exit the car multiple times, but the driver refused. Finally, after a 5th command and a threat to shoot into the vehicle, the door opened, and the driver exited the front door backward. His clothing was wet from the waist down, and his shoes were muddy. The driver was identified as Michael King. There were no other occupants. King was detained and taken to the sheriff's office for questioning. Following the interview, King was arrested and held in custody until trial. 2 days later, Denise's nude body was discovered by cadaver dogs not far from where King was apprehended. She was in a shallow grave, lying in a fetal position. A gunshot wound was visible on her body, and water was in the bottom of the hole. The medical examiner testified that Denise died from a single gunshot wound to the head. Further, the injury was consistent with the gun having been placed against Denise's forehead when fired. Additionally, the medical examiner found there was aspirated blood in Denise's lungs, indicating that she continued to breathe for a period after the wound was inflicted. King's attorney, Jerry Meissner, did not present any witnesses at trial. On the other hand, prosecutors called more than 25 witnesses to testify. In addition, prosecutors informed the jury that the heart-shaped ring given to Denise by Nathan early in their relationship was found in King's car. Denise's DNA was also found inside his vehicle as well as in his home and on his clothing. On February 6, 2008, Michael King was indicted on 1 count of first-degree murder for the killing of Denise Amber Lee. On August 28, 2009, after deliberating for 2.5 hours, Michael King was found guilty of first-degree murder, involuntary sexual battery, and kidnapping. 1 week later, the jury recommended a death sentence by a margin of 12-0. Michael King is currently on death row at the Union Correctional Institution in Railford, Florida, awaiting execution. Based on court records, it was apparent that Denise desperately fought for her life. She pounded on the windows of King's vehicle to draw attention, screamed for help, and begged one witness to call the cops. She used her abductor's phone to call the police. In addition, several other people called 911 to report suspicious incidents. But it was not enough, as authorities didn't find her in time. Community members' suggestions that 911 operators mishandled the calls led to harsh criticism of the local and national 911 systems. Nathan Lee formed the Denise Amber Lee Foundation to promote better training around 911 calls and to create public awareness. The foundation's website states, "The foundation is here so no other person, family, or community has to endure the pure hell of a similar event, and that no other children have to endure a lifetime without the comfort and guidance of their loving mother. We envision a time when a citizen's first call for help will be answered by a state-of-the-art 911 call center staffed with dedicated and highly trained professionals. A time when 911 will fail no one." On April 24, 2008, the Florida legislature passed the Denise Amber Lee Act. This act provides optional training for 911 operators. However, Lee's family continues to push for a national law to be passed that would institute mandatory training and certification for all emergency dispatchers. What are your thoughts on this case? Could anything have been done differently to secure a better outcome for the Lee family? Who's responsible for the ongoing resistance to mandatory training for emergency dispatchers? As usual, feel free to share your thoughts below.